You've heard him on EWTN Radio on Cresta in the afternoon. And now it's going to be Cresta in the night here on EWTN Live, where you'll see him tackle a number of cultural and philosophical dangers to our faith. Some are obvious and some are more subtle, but just as dangerous. So please stay with us. Thank you. Thank you very much and welcome. I'm Father Mitch Pacwa. Welcome to EWTN Live, which is our chance to bring you guests from all over the world. Before we get to our guests, I want to mention that today is a feast day for us Jesuits. It's the feast of all Jesuit saints and blessed. It's sort of our All Saints Day, but it includes also those Jesuits who are not canonized officially by the church, but have certainly gone on to the Lord, some of them as martyrs. I mentioned this morning at Mass, the Dutch priest who was killed trying to protect nuns from Islamic terrorists in Syria, what we now call ISIS, and many others who have given themselves serving the poor, teaching students, and doing all kinds of work over the years. So please join us in celebrating that, and I'll bless you with some relics of a number of Jesuit saints. Also, though, of course, we have a guest. He's a very popular voice on EWTN Radio, and we're excited to have him here on EWTN Television this evening. On his radio show, Cresta in the Afternoon, he handles everything from movie reviews to conversations about Islam and how Catholics should view politics. He's also the author of a great book. It's called Dangers to the Faith, Recognizing Catholicism's 21st Century Opponents. So please welcome Al Cresta. Al, how are you doing?
Doing great. It's wonderful to be here with you.
Well, we've turned it around, haven't we? 22 years ago, you interviewed me on your radio show.
It's a long time ago. I had just returned to the church, in fact.
Yeah,
That was 1992.
Right,
it was,
right.
I can remember. Because I had some questions, lingering questions after my first confession.
Mm-hmm.
So I took advantage of your presence in the studio to clarify a few things for me on the sacrament. So yes, I remember, and we had some mutual acquaintances and friends that we realized that we had too. So it was wonderful.
Just so that you know and other people are aware of the danger, when you ask me questions like that, I just might turn it into a book. and I did that book, Go in Peace, about going to confession.
Yeah,
so you got me started, and
I'm glad
started writing those things down. Well, speaking of books, you've got one that I really was just taken with because it's so clear. It's so readable, and this Dangers to the Faith points out a number of issues we have in the 21st century, because this is not a world where everybody just wants to get along with the Catholic Church and sing Kumbaya.
No, it isn't.
Who are some of these opponents, and what is their problem?
Yeah. Well, the book covers a wide range of them. Yes. It covers, I think you look at it as 3 R's, maybe is the easiest way to look at it. There are those who are relativists. They are trying to say that there ultimately are no truths. The relativist is the person who holds that nobody has any truth except, of course, himself, who's telling you that nobody has any truth.
Yes, and they're pretty absolute about there being no absolute truth.
Right, exactly. So you've got the relativists who are playing around with our moral code. You have those who are redefining the history of Christianity. This is one of those things that people are not quite aware of. what happened, so remember the Da Vinci Code phenomenon.
Oh, I keep on calling it the Da Vinci Code.
Well, that's very good. What people didn't realize is that Dan Brown was working off not just products of his imagination, but he was cherry picking from certain academic books, and he was muddling them quite a bit. But he was trying to claim that really the history of Christianity had been misunderstood by the Catholic Church and by historians through the centuries. And
everybody except for him.
Dan Brown and a few academics who he seemed to like. So it deals with the attempts to redefine the history of Catholicism in particular, and we can come back and deal with that in more detail. And then it also deals with those who are trying to reduce the human person to nothing much more than a product of blind and purposeless forces. We actually have some brilliant, well-financed inventors, executives, philanthropists out there who believe that the human race has now become, you might say, the evolutionary process aware of itself.
So that human beings, using Charles Darwin back in 1860s, discovered evolution. Now we know more about it according to them, and therefore we can be in charge of our own evolution.
And that's the big phase. So you had Homo erectus, then you had Homo sapiens, and now we're going to be Homo, well, take your pick.
Electronics?
Artificial intelligence, artificial intelligence, brain-computer interfaces, genetic engineering plays into it. And it's amazing because we usually think about this as science fiction, but now we've got people like the president and CEO of Google, an inventor, Ray Kurzweil, who we've all seen his work. He invented a very famous synthesizer. He also did text-to-speech technology, optical scanning technology, worked with Stevie Wonder. And he's published a book called The Singularity. And he actually believes that by 2040, we will have human lifespans that vastly longer than we've got now. And that you will also have, and this is I had a hard time believing he was serious about this, but he actually believes that we will have brain-computer interfaces, and that if we don't interact with artificial intelligence, if we don't kind of meld our mind with artificial intelligence, that we may well lose control of our own creation.
In other words, like the movie where Arnold Schwarzenegger is a robot from the future, that the animals take, or the machines take over. And try to destroy human beings.
The only way to harness that is to somehow, you might say, tame it from the beginning by melding our own natural intelligence with this artificial intelligence, controlling it all the time. It is, I mean, I have to say, I interviewed him back in 1992, and he had written a book called The Spirit of Artificial Intelligence, or something like that. It was, and I didn't take it seriously then. Now I find out that he was not a crackpot at all. He was a deadly serious inventor, well-moneyed, and he's got a network of people. In fact, there's a whole movement now. It's called the transhumanist movement. And John Paul II was well aware of them. Jimmy Carter's national security advisor, Zbigniew Brzezinski, Polish, Catholic, said upon John Paul II's death that he was the man who best understood the new era we were entering, and it was going to be a post-human era. We will have created a form of intelligence and life which transcends human beings. John Paul II saw that coming, and that's why he was such a champion of the dignity of the human person.
See, and there are a number of issues with all this too, because on one hand, the human race is in very serious numerical decline. in many parts of the world, they don't talk about that so much. But Father Pavone was telling me an interview with the man who invented the contraceptive pill. And he said, it's the worst thing I ever did in my life. Because, Russia is declining by 1 million a year.
Yeah.
And Japan is declining at least by 100,000, probably more.
Yeah.
And a lot of other countries in Europe and other places are declining except for some immigrants. So if the number of people declines and they move towards artificial intelligence,
yes.
This is something that you say, well, who will maintain all this?
Yeah, exactly. And we've got a number of converging problems right now. And you talk about Russia. You got Vladimir Putin. They're declaring certain days of recreation. So husbands and wives can get together and begin to repopulate Russia. I mean,
Right.
this is actually, and there are awards, monetary awards given them. France has
you can win a car
Yes.
if you have a baby on the right due date.
Right, exactly. Exactly.
um,
That's a great contest, huh?
Yeah,
I mean,
it's very odd because people used to have babies because they loved each other.
that was yeah, now you can get a car. That's maybe you can love each other and get a car. I don't know. But Pope Paul VI warned about this in Humanae Vitae, and it's so disappointing that many Catholics to this day, including clergy, don't realize what a prophetic figure Paul VI was in Humanae
Now, Blessed
Vitae.
Paul VI.
Yes, that's right, Blessed Paul VI now. But he predicted there. I mean, remember, the contraception pill only became widely available around 1960.
Yeah, well,
And so-
it was, and then had to be tested, and it became available for prescriptions
Yes.
only about 1971 or so.
Well, a little earlier than that, but
Oh,
he was
that
more,
was-
it's right around that time that it's becoming part of the way of life. And he's already warning about it. I mean, if you remember 1964, the Beatles came over to the United States singing I Want to Hold Your Hand. And then 1968, the Rolling Stones were on Ed Sullivan. Ed Sullivan was a Catholic, by the way, who tried to maintain certain controls over the entertainment. And Ed Sullivan told Mick Jagger from the Rolling Stones, I don't want you to sing Let's Spend the Night Together. Can you sing Let's Spend Some Time Together? And Jagger said, well, yeah, I can do that. And then he ignored him and sang Let's Spend the Night Together anyways.
Right.
But pop culture went on to 1987, George Michael singing I Want Your Sex. We have gangster rap coming up, 80s, 90s, women are degraded there. Pop culture has declined in the way that we sing about male-female relationships.
Yeah.
This was predicted by Blessed Paul VI. He said that the widespread availability of artificial contraception would lead to a degradation of women. It would lead to explosion of out-of-wedlock births. It would lead to an explosion in divorces. This was 1968. The divorce revolution in the United States doesn't begin until the 70s. So he wasn't speaking after the fact. This is a prophetic remark. And then the thing that's most frightening is his claim that the nations of the world, the civil authorities, would be able to use artificial contraception and all the related changes that go along with it, and use that to coerce people. And guess what? China starts its one-child policy. It starts forced abortion. We've had some third world nations in which there's involuntary sterilization practiced now and then.
Well,
he predicted it.
And President Obama has signed a lot. I mean, it's over 100 executive orders linking foreign aid
Yes.
to also telling third world women, especially in Africa, the Caribbean, and Latin America, that we'll give you aid if you let us teach your women how to use contraception and abort their children.
Right.
So, I mean, it's also our policy. We won't give you help unless you get rid of your babies.
Yes, John Paul II in 1994 at the United Nations Population Conference in Cairo,
Right.
saw this happening, and he built a coalition with a number of the Muslim nations, and were able to, made it possible to withstand some of the European zealots who were insisting on this linkage between abortion, contraception, and financial aid to these countries.
Right.
The United States, Ronald Reagan put into place what was called the Mexico City policy,
Right.
where the United States would not favor the linkage of foreign aid to increased abortion or increased access to contraception.
Right.
Republican presidents since have gone back to that Mexico City policy. Democratic presidents have abolished it. Now, we're not going to bring in the kingdom of God politically.
Right.
There's no doubt about that.
No,
the church doesn't teach that. But as disciples of Jesus who are called to be good citizens, we should keep in mind that our votes make a difference.
Right.
And here's a good example of it, where the Mexico City policy, when you have a Republican president, it gets back in place. You have a Democratic president, it's wiped
out
out.
the window.
Yeah.
And and again, what's at stake is not a political thing where we're trying to wage a war on women. We're trying to prevent a
Right.
war on babies.
Absolutely.
And especially babies of color.
Yeah.
Because in New York City, something like 85% of African American babies are aborted.
The numbers are stunning.
It's stunning. And 60% of Planned Parenthood clinics for abortion are in African American neighborhoods, even though they're only 12% of the population. Right.
This goes back to its founder too, as you know,
Right.
Margaret Sanger.
Right.
She did think that she wanted ethnic minorities and racial minorities to have quick and easy access
Right.
to contraception.
Well, she
and that
said
eventually becomes, for her, abortion becomes a form of contraception. Right.
she was a speaker at the Ku Klux Klan Women's Auxiliary meetings 4 or 5 times, and she said, she wrote in print, blacks are a weed, they must be eliminated. Yeah. Now this, so in the church gets opposed because we say no to all this.
Yeah.
No, we don't want people of color or anybody to have this. And a lot of the opposition that you describe is, influenced by this worldview that sees the Catholic Church standing up for human dignity,
Yes.
for life, and for the poor. And these are the people they want to eliminate.
Yeah.
As a so they oppose us on other things, like the famous quote from Christopher, the atheist Christopher
Hitchens. Yeah.
that the most wicked person of the 20th century was Mother Teresa of Calcutta. Now think of her competition. She had Hitler, Stalin, Mao Zedong in the running, and she won.
Yeah. Amazing.
But they were all atheists. So.
I interviewed Christopher Hitchens.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, and in fact, I talk about it in the book. Hitchens was a wild atheist.
Yes.
He was deeply committed to combating religion in all its forms. He didn't distinguish between
he hated
good
them all.
forms. Yeah, oh, they were all bad. And he had a special axe to grind against Mother Teresa. I'm not sure why she bothered him so much, but she did. He was very articulate and actually a fairly charming guy, believe it or not, to spend time with. When we were together, I asked him a question. I said, so you don't believe that God exists. You believe that human beings are the product of natural forces, blind, purposeless, impersonal natural forces that had no prevision of the end they were achieving. And so human life just kind of popped up. Here we are. It has no intrinsic worth or dignity. He said, yes. I said, well, then let me ask you a question. Christopher, if you had the opportunity to ensure almost a heavenly type standard of living for all human beings, so that there'd be nobody who's hungry, nobody who's suffering, nobody who's without wonderful opportunities at creative work. If you could have all that, but the only thing you would have to do would be to torture a 6-month-old child, would you do that? And he paused. He said, oh, I've heard this before. That's a good question. I've gone around on this quite a bit. No, I would not. I said, so you have a moral absolute. So you believe that there's some objective morality, some objective evil that you would be unwilling to perform, even if it had enormous benefits for untold billions of people. And he said, yes. I said, well, how in the world can you hold to that objective morality if there's no God? Why would you just think that that moral principle is kind of just hanging out there? Nothing else came into existence and is reliable. The human beings are purposeless. They don't have. So why do you think you hold to this belief that that child should not be destroyed? Mm-hmm. Anyways, he was very inconsistent. But I'll tell you this. He became an atheist in large part because his mother, whom he loved, ran off with a apostate Anglican priest. They lived together and they committed suicide together. And he was the one to have to claim her body. He had to, I think it was in South Africa. He had to go down there. So you never know what's going on in somebody's mind. Right. And I like to think that that moment where he refused to torture that child, mm-hmm. in spite of all the, quote, good things that could come, I'd like to think that at that moment he was actually close to the kingdom.
Yeah, I hope. I know I prayed for many, many, many times, including after his death. I know his brother's a believer.
He is, yeah.
Very committed Anglican.
He is.
And, it also points out, while we have a lot of opponents and they criticize us, we also have to be alert that we have a responsibility to live our faith with integrity in order to give a good example that this is possible to be a Christian without complete hypocrisy. And when we are hypocritical, to be able to say, yeah, I'm a hypocrite. Yeah. And I'm taking that to God because he can also forgive that.
Yeah. Yes.
And
absolutely,
this kind of integrity of our faith, and learning to say, yes, I really am one of the sinners. Yeah. We're not all perfect, but this is the goal of holiness to which we aspire, and it's nothing less. And let people know, you may still disagree with us, but we're going to do our best to give a model of how to live this Christian life.
I returned to the church in 1992. That's when we met. Mm-hmm. So it's hard to believe 22 years have gone by, mm-hmm. but I want everybody to know that I am more enthusiastic and excited about the prospects of being Catholic and witnessing to the reality of Christ and his resurrection today than I was back in 1992. Mm-hmm. I think things are happening in America that will be giving us the opportunity to show a very distinct way of life. Sociologists, when they go out and they do their surveys, and they look at self-identified Catholics, these are people, they may not be Catholic at all, but they just, they may not have been to Mass in 25 years, but they identify as Catholic. When sociologists go and they look at self-identified Catholics, they see no difference between these self-identified Catholics and Americans else. Generally. Yeah, right. They're indistinguishable. However, once you factor in weekly Mass attendance, things change. I'll give you one quick example from the world of politics, not because I think it's the most important, but it's the easiest to measure.
Sure.
In the 2012 presidential election, self-identified Catholics voted about 60% for President Obama. Now, I opposed President Obama because he's a champion of abortion.
Right.
He doesn't just tolerate it, he's a champion of it. Never saw an
Exactly.
abortion he didn't like.
Yes.
Okay?
I mean, that's one of the famous cases in Illinois, that when a baby survived
Right.
an abortion and the nurse killed it anyway by suffocating it in a bag of formaldehyde, he would not vote for a law to say that that's illegal, even though Roe versus Wade said that's a human being.
That is right. That is right.
Even by Roe versus Wade standards,
Yes.
that child should not have died.
That's right.
But he would not stand up for that
Even
child's life.
Right.
He voted present.
That's the kind of person he is. He's a champion of abortion rights. Self-identified Catholics voted right along with the American people. Roughly 60% voted for him. Once you factor in weekly mass attendance, no other forms of spiritual commitment, but just weekly mass attendance, it goes down to 40%. Now, still not great, but still, that's a big difference.
What it means is that the faith and moral teaching of the church make an impact when people live their Catholic faith. It does make a difference.
And I would say this is an informal survey that we've done on Crest in the Afternoon with our listeners. Once you factor in another type of spiritual commitment, weekly mass attendance, and in this case, listeners to Catholic radio. Okay, could have been people who go on retreat, could have been people who read, Catholic books, but for us, it's easy. We have access to our listeners, so it was listeners to Catholic radio. All of a sudden, 85% of those people voted against President Obama. So it's 60% self-identified Catholics, 40% weekly mass attenders, 15% listeners of Catholic radio. So what that tells me is that if you're a disciple of Jesus, if you're learning, if you're trying to conform your life to his, if you're trying to have his life reproduced in yours, and you see the Catholic Church as the vehicle by which you can become like the Master, you change your way of living. The grace of God enables you to change the way you live. You were talking about the importance of demonstrating a distinct way of life, a Catholic way of life.
A good example.
A good example. I don't think there's anything more important for the future of this country. This is why we've started saying on Crest in the Afternoon and Ave Maria Radio, we're saying, build the church and you will bless the nation.
Yes.
So, but you have to have, we've got to be able to say, here's the community of God's people. Here, the baptized who are united with Christ. We're not perfect, but we do have a different way of approaching life, and we tell you, Jesus brings abundant life. Take a look at the way we handle suffering. Take a look at the way we handle children in marriage. Take a look at how we do our scholarship. Take a look and see if you can find Jesus in all of this. Yep. But we have to be challenging one another, serving one another, praying for one another, loving one another, admonishing one another. Yeah. But I think we're ready for it. I think we're right there.
We're also ready for a break. I want to again remind you that Al's book is called Dangers to the Faith. It's available at EWTN Religious Catalog. You can go to EWTNRC.com or call them 1-800-854-6316. It is really informative. It gives you all kinds of background and ways to respond to not just telling what these other problems are, but how to respond to them. And I urge you strongly to get hold of this book. And stay with us, because in 2 minutes we'll be back with your questions in the studio questions. Thank you. Thank you very much. First, I want to invite you to do what these nice folks from Louisiana and Texas have done, which is to come here on pilgrimage and be in our studio audience. We have, is that just one busload of y'all? Or two busloads? One bus. One busload from Louisiana. Nice people. And if you get a chance to do that, or you come by yourself or bring your family, that's fine. But call our pilgrimage department at 205-271-2966. Or go to the website ewtn.com and we'll get, they'll give you all kind of information about where you can stay, scheduling of programs and all that. All right. Are you ready for some questions?
Love it.
Come
Love
on,
questions.
giddy up.
Yeah.
Let's start off with Anastasia. Hello, Anastasia. Where are you from?
I'm from Ohio, Father.
Great. And your question?
Well, I appreciate your taking my call. I'm a parent and a grandparent, and I watch Threshold, and I love that program. And you talk about the real philosophy that seeks for truth and thinks things through to their logical conclusion. However, most of the philosophies and ideologies that our children and our grandchildren are exposed to is on secular media and the movies and the games they play. How can we get our children and our grandchildren exposed to this truthful philosophies and ideologies that are going to help our country bounce back and help them to have better lives? I didn't know if Al or you would have maybe a suggestion that's something that we grandparents and parents can do.
Anastasia, that's a great question.
Yeah.
So here you have and the stuff everywhere.
It is.
It's there are these underlying philosophies that just pop up in comedies and movies on TV and all that. Big Bang Theory is #1 TV show, and it's got a lot of messages about people of faith and such included in it. What do people do to deal with that?
Yeah, it is a serious problem. Popular culture is around us. It's very difficult to get free of it. Even if in your home you manage, you're very diligent, you still, your children are out with friends and things get passed around. I think the important thing is, number one, to not panic and to relax, because, God loves your children even more than you do. The second thing, though, is you have to spend time with them. You have to enjoy, you have to be available when they want to talk. I think this is one of the hardest things for parents to deal with in this society, because we're all so busy. We're all trying to do better at our jobs. We're all trying to get more out of life. We're trying to make sure our kids are active and involved. You have to take the time, though. There's no such thing as quality time apart from quantity of time. And so what this means is you have to spend time with them, listen to what they say, try to fill in the blanks yourself, read together. Storytelling is one of the best ways to communicate a philosophy of life.
Yes.
Is through stories. That's what Jesus does with the parables. The Old Testament is primarily historical narrative and poetry. And I think that is the best way of pick the stories that you think are edifying. That's the word I use. They build you up in the faith. After you've done reading the story or watching it on television, you feel as though you are a stronger person, you're excited, you have a smile on your face. And it's up to the parents to then ask the questions so that the kids can be equipped when they go out into the world. Challenge the kids. Don't be afraid. I think many times parents are afraid. They think that if they don't challenge the kids are going to be fine. I would say, why do you believe in God? Can you tell me why do you believe in God? I know we go to church as a family and everything, but I'm curious. I mean, you're old enough now. I'm not talking about an 8-year-old here.
Right.
No, I'm talking about when they're in their
15,
teens.
16.
Yeah.
Sure.
Say, come on, tell me why you believe in God. I want to know about your experience. Let's talk. But I think there's no easy way.
And part of it too is being able to listen, because kids, especially after about 13, 14, they are trying to put their ideas together.
Yes.
They're trying to think things through. And part of it is learning how to listen to what they've figured out so far, but then also helping them to follow the logic of what they think to its conclusions and what makes sense here. And this is something that is, I think, a great way to do that. But also, I would add that when you don't know the answer to something and you haven't thought it out yourself, and they'll ask you stuff like that.
That's right. You're lucky if they ask you too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You say, well, I don't know that, but let's go figure it out together. Let's go study that together.
Yeah.
And you engage them in the journey to learn more together.
That's wonderful.
That's where you are being an adult teacher.
Yeah.
That is, and you don't, I've been living with my ignorance for 65 years. I'm comfortable with it. So don't be nervous about it.
Let me add just one more thing there, and that is we have music, we have television, we have movies, we have kids are going to be looking at these products of pop culture, and they're going to enjoy them. What you want to do is make sure you're aware of what they're enjoying, and say, hey, that's an interesting song. I'd like to know what it's about. Can we listen to it together? Or go find out what it's about. And then set up a situation where you can say, oh, listen to that. Huh, interesting song. I noticed you were listening to it the other day too. Do you like this? You have to take the time to listen and watch what they're watching. Listen to the music they're listening to. And let them know you're interested. I can't think of anything more important than that.
And something else I've noticed, I sometimes go to these big bins at the discount stores and stuff, and they'll have 50 cowboy movies. Now this is more for boys, I know, but the 50 cowboy TV shows or 50, a million John Wayne movies, and sometimes letting them see those older programs and what television and the movies used to be like in teaching that you look for justice. That's what the Lone Ranger was about. You have to do what's just and try not to hurt people, but get the bad guys and bring justice to the weak. That was the message. And I learned that as a little boy. It's a good thing for me.
It is excellent.
Sir, where are you from?
I just drove here from Michigan, but I'm from San Diego.
Good to have you here. It's a
you.
long
Good to
way
be
to
here.
get to hear from San Diego, but what's your question?
Thank you, Father. My question is, why do you think they came up with abortion? Do you think they did it to depopulate the earth or to get more stem cells?
Good question.
I think that it's actually simpler than that. I think it's just a matter of individual rights and freedom. America has had, really Western civilization has had 3 abortion crises. We had one in the Roman Empire.
Right.
There was one in 19th century America, and now we're in the 3rd abortion crisis. So it isn't as though it's always been illegal. We've had to fight about this in the past. I think, at least at this time, I think it's fair to say the reason abortion has become popular is that it has served as a form of birth control. And I think that's the way it's been used. Young people in their passions are not all that interested in necessarily using contraception. And they get pregnant, women get pregnant, and they have a problem. And abortion was a way of, quote, handling that problem. And I believe that really that's what it was. I do think that certain of the champions of abortion, they also thought it had implications for what they thought was the population bomb. But I do think the primary driving force behind abortion was individual rights and liberties.
And back in the 60s, one of the battle cries for abortion was, my body, my choice.
That's right.
And instead of saying this is also the baby's body, but the baby has no choice. That was the other part of that sentence that never got spoken by those folks. I think he's also dealing with, being from California, they had spent something like $6 billion
Oh, yes.
that they didn't really have to spend
Yes.
on stem cell research from embryonic stem cells, which don't help.
No.
It's adult stem cells that are successful for medical treatment. But in the embryonic stem cells didn't help, and they were immoral
Right.
because you and I can offer to give our stem cells.
Yes.
The embryo had to be killed. It had no choice.
That's right. And the sad thing too is that even the embryonic stem cells, they're too plastic. They don't have enough internal resilience to be good in experiments. The adult stem cells have enough of their own internal character and resistance that they make more trust. You can work with them more consistently and confidently. The embryonic stem cells fall apart on you. Essentially, that's what happens.
So
They're
it's
not
not
firm
just
enough.
that my personality in old age is crotchety, so also
Your
are
cells
my stem cells.
Your stem cells are. It's just the way it
No
is,
one
Father.
should be
You know.
surprised.
Yeah.
All right, we have a caller. Hello, Dan.
Hi, Father.
Hi, where are you from?
I'm calling from Cool Weather, Connecticut.
My
Yeah,
home
y'all are
state.
getting a good blast of global cooling over there.
Right.
Another one's coming on its way. Get ready. So what's your question?
Well, my question is this. I'm very interested in what Al had to say about his book and mentioning Hitchens and his philosophy. And I was wondering, why have so many groups left the church? And I'm thinking in particular of academics, current philosophers, the world of the theater. So many of these groups have left the church. Why? And what can be done? What do you think about these groups coming back? And with that, thank you for taking my question, and I'll hang up and listen to your answer.
Great question, Dan. Thank you.
Yeah. You can take a look at all areas of modern culture. Sociologists have a phrase. It's called engines of modernity. And what they mean are those institutions that make up the modern age. Bureaucratic and centralized government, the entertainment industry,
The education.
and the academy, multinational corporations. If you take a look at all of those, quote, engines of modernity, you'll notice that Christianity, not just Catholicism, but Christianity in general, has no significant influence in shaping any of those engines of modernity. The only place where the Catholic faith has some significant cultural influence is in the church itself and in families. That's how bad it is. This is part of a talk that I give, trying to remind people that it's worse than we realize in some ways. And we need to go back and rethink what it means to be a minority community in this world. Now, having said that, God is good. We've been through this before. This is not new to the Holy Spirit. It's new to us because we're only here for a generation. How do you win back communities or institutions that were once influenced by the faith?
Such as the university.
Such as the universities, because of course the world has a debt to the Catholic Church here. The modern university is traced right back to the cathedral schools of the Middle Ages and to the formation of the university at Paris, Oxford, Bologna, Salamanca. We brought the university into existence. And we lost the university beginning roughly in the 18th century.
Yeah, 1700s.
Yeah, so we're not going to get it back. I mean, there is no way of recovering that.
As a matter of fact, I would just add that at the universities, they're becoming notorious for having no openness of
Right.
thought. If you are a religious person, you are not argued with, but ridiculed and mocked
Yeah.
to silence you.
Yes, it's gotten bad.
Very bad.
Even
There's
when
no academic freedom for religious people in those places.
Yeah, we used to talk, when I was in college in the 1970s, we used to talk about secularization and secularism and all this, and we thought it was bad, but it wasn't what it is today. I was a student at Michigan State University. I could talk with any of my professors about the faith. I could include it in the papers that I wrote, as long as I wasn't giving propaganda, as long as I was
Right.
thinking through
Right.
things. They were really happy because I was presenting a point of view that was different, and they thought that was respectable. I had a physics professor, I wrote a paper on the physics of the resurrection. And he thought it was fascinating, called me into his room, we talked for a while, and I got a chance to ask him. I said, Doctor, what do you think happened that Easter morning? And he said, I don't know, but something I don't understand happened. That's as far as he could go at that time.
Sure.
But the point is, no ridicule, no hostility.
No.
Just,
You didn't lose grade points
no,
for being a believer,
right.
as happens today.
Yes, it is more difficult today for students. I have 5 children. 3 of them are in, actually 4 of them are through college. One of them is finishing up now. And we talk about this all the time. Things are much more difficult today. Here's good news, though. I always like to bring up good news. Over the last generation, philosophy faculties in America have had more Christians in them than at any time since the 19th century. So there was a real revival of Christian philosophers in Anglo-American universities. People like Alvin Plantinga, people like Ralph McInerney, people like Nicholas Wolterstorff, William Lane Craig. There's a number of them. Now, I don't know what it'll be like the next generation. It's not clear to me that that's going to continue. But we had this little revival of Christian philosophy, not necessarily Catholic philosophy, but Christian philosophy in the world of academia. And I think we will now and then see little outbursts like that. But I think the only way that we win back the field of the academics is to take the Catholic colleges and universities that are there right now, and I would like to see truth in advertising. If they are no longer Catholic institutions, I'd like to see the name removed.
Right.
Those who
The
are
name Catholic.
Yes, yes. I think that people deserve to know who represents the faith.
Right.
And I do think different rules govern a university than govern a pulpit. You know, there are different activities. But if a number of universities that were once strong Catholic institutions are not, and there's no reason to believe they're going to become so anytime soon.
Right.
So retrieve what we can, and then strengthen the new efforts that are out there. It'll take at least a generation.
And if you want information on that, you can always go to the Newman Society.
Yes, that's right.
John Henry Newman Society. They have a lot of reviews of universities and colleges.
They do,
In
yeah.
terms of their Catholic identity and how that works on campus in real life, not in advertising.
Right.
Father, where are you from?
The Diocese of Baton Rouge,
Aren't
Louisiana.
you some? I love it down there. Great folks down there. And what is your question?
Mr. Cresta, thank you for your new book. It's a gift to the church.
Thank you.
In the first half, we talked a little bit about relativism, and our conversation has stemmed from that since then. Could you give us perhaps a taste of 1 or 2 other topics that you mentioned that are dangerous to the church this evening?
Sure, I'd love to. There's one area that I don't think people are aware of, and so I'd like to make us all aware of it. Let me go back to the Da Vinci Code. At least 80 million copies of that book are out there right now. The Da Vinci Code was a novel, but it claimed to be based on fact. Dan Brown actually has a page at the beginning of the book that says these facts of art history are real, these facts of church history are real. So people were led to believe that while it was a novel, the historical references were accurate. Now, the point is, though, that the book, time and again, makes false statements. Makes a statement, for instance, that there are 80 Gospels other than the canonical Gospels. Well, even if you include the Gospels, so-called Gospels, that were written in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th centuries that have no connection with the historical Jesus, they're works of fiction. Even if you include those, you don't come up with 80. I mean, he doesn't even get the numbers right on this.
No.
But
Bless his heart.
what's going on is an attempt to recast the origins of Christianity. There was a major work of scholarship in the 19th century by a guy named Walter Bauer. It had to do with orthodoxy and heresy in earliest Christianity. his claim was that there never was an authoritative teaching church before the Council of Nicaea, okay, in 325 AD. So he has to say that it was just, there was this Jesus thing that happened, all right? And then people just kind of thought about it. And yeah, there were people who ran and they had this interpretation, and then there were these people who had this interpretation, and there really wasn't any authoritative, reliable teaching. In the 2nd and 3rd, into the 4th centuries, bishops came on the scene, especially associated with Rome, and through money and politics, they imposed orthodoxy on the whole thing. So, heresy, in this case, precedes orthodoxy, okay? Well, the Catholic Church has taught just the opposite. The Church Father Eusebius, in his history, gives us a pretty good idea of what happened in those early centuries.
And other things, for instance, when Marcion denies everything Jewish that's in the Bible, it's the Pope who excommunicates him.
That's right.
In 142 AD.
Yes, very good. And so we know that this idea that there was no authoritative teaching in the first generation, we know that's nonsense. However, there's a personal agenda that a number of scholars have today. People like Bart Ehrman at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, people like Elaine Pagels, who wrote the book, The Gnostic Gospels. They have a certain vision of the world, and they see the church as an obstacle to the world they want to create. So what they're trying to do is redefine Christian orthodoxy.
Right.
Dan Brown was a recipient of that, and it drove me nuts to hear what New York Times was saying and other reviewers who should have seen through it.
The
History Channel, yeah, these kind of things.
Which has turned into Sasquatch Central because because they talk more about the outer space people building the pyramids instead of the Egyptians.
Well, I remember one reviewer saying something like, John Grisham, in his novels, has taught us a lot about the law in torts. And Tom Clancy, in his novels, has taught us about the CIA and the world of spies. And now Dan Brown teaches us about art history and the Catholic Church. And when I read that, I said to myself, you got to be kidding. I get my ancient history from the Flintstones. I mean, what in the world?
Right, that's my anthropology teacher, Fred.
That's where I get my anthropology. It's from Fred and Barney, and Wilma and Betty.
Yeah.
And Bam Bam.
And I think it's important to point out, Dan Brown has some true good points. Paris is in France. London is in England. And Da Vinci made paintings. Otherwise, nothing reliable is in the book that I could find.
No. But this is not going to go away. And we will see through the next generation this continual battle to redefine Christian origins. And I just want you to be aware that it's going to be there. Be not afraid, because the church, all I can tell you is that the evidence is there. The historical evidence is there. The church has never been afraid of the truth, never been afraid of history. When we've discovered the Gnostic Gospels, so-called, we weren't afraid of those. We weren't afraid of the Dead Sea Scrolls. We weren't afraid of the Didache when that was found.
But here's the other thing. It's not enough not to be afraid. It's also more important to be educated.
Yes.
To learn as much as Al Creston. To read, you can read the fathers. You go to EWTN.com. Go to our documents library. Look up patristics. It's there.
Yes, it is.
You can download it for free and read it in your little Kindles, whatever those books are, and read and
Kindle.
know it. Kindle, is that
Kindle.
it?
And Kindle Fire.
Yes.
I got them with me. I got two. They're with me.
Well, what you don't have is any more time. We are flat out. It is a delight to have you
Thanks,
with
Father.
us.
Wonderful being with you.
And I want to make sure that I give everybody a blessing. I have sort of like a Jesuit all-star card of Jesuit relics of saints, about 30 of our saints. And on this feast of the All Saints of the Society, may Almighty God bless you, and by the intercession of St. Ignatius, St. Francis Xavier, and all the Jesuit saints, bless you, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. And we can bring you Al Cresta on this show, on the radio, and all the other great programs because you make this network possible. It is brought to you by you. So please remember to keep us in between your gas bill, electric bill, and cable bill. And we will try to pay all of our bills because you give us your help. God bless you, and thank you all.